welcome back to my video, and today we're going to read Oliver Pig and the Best Fort Ever. Contents. Chapter 1 is the fort, the best fort ever, no girls allowed, the camp out. Today, said Oliver, I'm going to build a fort. It will be my biggest, tallest, strongest, best fort ever. Can I help? Asked Amanda. No, said Oliver. This is my fort. Oliver found a good spot for his fort by the back fence. Now, what can I use to build it? He wondered. Oliver looked around. Rocks would be good, he said. He carried 6 rocks to his fort. Oliver looked behind the garage. Bricks would be great, he said. He loaded them into his wagon. Now I can build a wall. He piled the bricks on top of the rocks, but the wall wasn't very high, and it kept falling down. I need some wood, he said. Oliver saw the back fence. If only the fence was falling down, he said. I could use the boards. But the fence wasn't falling down. Oliver saw Father's garden. If only I could use those tall poles, he said. But Father would be angry. The tomato plants would fall over. Oliver saw the picnic table. Oh boy, he said. If only I could use that table. I could make the biggest, tallest, strongest, best fort ever. But Mother will be angry. And they could have never had a picnic. So you can see he's hesitating to pick one first. Oliver walked to the front yard. He saw a pile branch that the wind had knocked down. He saw sticks under the apple tree. Finally, he said, I found some wood. Oliver dragged the wood to his fort. He piled the branch and sticks on top of the rocks and bricks. Then he sat inside his new fort. It was a tight squeeze. The sticks were poking him. The pine needles were tickling him. And if he moved, the fort might fall down. Amanda came outside. Is that your best fort ever? She said. She laughed. You didn't make a fort, she said. You made a nest. This next chapter the best fort ever. Albert and James came over to play in Oliver's fort. My feet are sticking out, said James. Move over, Oliver. Oliver moved over. Now, my whole body is sticking out, said Albert. Move over, Oliver. Oliver moved all over again. Now, you're sitting on me, said James. And I'm all curled up like a snail, said Albert. He stretched. Uh-oh, said Oliver. Watch out, said James. The fort fell down. It's too bad about your fort, said Albert. It was too small, said James. I know, said Oliver, but I don't have enough stuff to make it bigger. Said Albert. I think I have an idea. Said James. Me too. See you later, Oliver. Albert and James went home. Father, said Oliver, I need more stuff to build my fort. Do you have any old junk I could use? Let's look in the garage, said Father. The garage was full of old junk. You can use those boards, said Father, and those broom, and that hose, and those tires. This is good junk, said Oliver. Thanks, Father. Thank you, said Father. You helped me clean out the garage. Oliver carried the boards and broom and hose and tires to his fort. Hey, Oliver, said Albert. Look what I found. He was carrying a big box Oliver had ever seen. Super, said Oliver. I found a box too, said James. And a blanket, and some poles. We could make a tippy. Great, said Oliver, and look at all the good junk I found. Oliver and Albert and James started to build. Your new fort will be so big, said James, that we can fit inside. We won't have to curl like snails. It will be so tall, said Albert, that I can even stand up. And it will be so strong, said Oliver, that it will never fall down. And it will have a teepee, said James. And a tunnel, said Albert. And maybe even a tower, said Oliver. This is going to be my best fort ever. They were planning to build. The next chapter is No Girls Allowed. Oliver and Albert and James were working on Oliver's fort. The big box will be the fort, said Oliver, and the little box will be the lookout tower on top. Good idea, said Albert. Can I help? Asked Amanda. No, said Oliver. No girls allowed, said Albert. Go away, said James. Amanda went away, but not very far. She's still there, said James. Pretend you don't see her, said Oliver. We need some rope, said Albert. You can use my jump rope, said Amanda. We told you to go away, said Oliver. We told you no girls allowed, said Albert. And no little kids either, said James. I'm not a little kid, said Amanda. She went away, but not very far. I bet she's still there, said Albert. I bet she's spying on us. Are we spying? Amanda asked Oliver. You know what we do to spy, said Albert. Especially little girl spies, said James. Amanda went inside. She's really gone this time, said Albert. Good, said Oliver. Now we can build. They made tires into a tunnel. They made blanket and poles into a tipi. They made windows in the lookout tower. The fort was almost finished. All we need is a flag, said Albert. We can make out of that broom. I'm so hot, said Oliver. Building a fort was hard work. We need a drink, said Albert. Amanda and her friend Lollipop were drinking lemonade under the apple tree. Quick, said James. Give us some lemonade. You can't have our lemonade, said Amanda. Please, said Oliver. No, said Lollipop. No boys allowed under the apple tree, said Amanda, and no big kids. You're mean, said Oliver. I know, said Amanda, but you're mean first. Really, really mean, said Lollipop. Maybe, said Amanda. We might give you some if you let us see your forts. I'm so thirsty, said James. I could drink a whole ocean. Okay, said Oliver. You can see our fort. But you can't help build it. Who wants to help build it? Said a Lollipop. It's too hot. So they crawled through the tunnel. And Oliver and Albert and James and Amanda and Lollipop all had lemonade in Oliver's fort. The last chapter is called Camp Out. The flag was up. Oliver's fort was finally finished. Wow, said Oliver. This really is my best fort ever. Oliver and Albert and James played it in all day. I wish we could live in your fort all the time, said Albert. My mother and father wouldn't let me, said James. Me neither, said Oliver. But we could camp out it all night. Yes, said Albert and James. So that night they had a camp out. What is all that stuff? Asked Oliver. It's just my sleeping bag, said Albert, and my pajamas and my toothbrush and a few books and my book collection. You brought your books, said James. You'll be lonely without me, said Albert. Father gave them a flashlight. Mother gave them a bag of cookies. Have a good time, she said. Oliver and Albert and James crawled into Oliver's fort. Let's not go to sleep, said Albert. We can stay awake all night, said James. Okay, said Oliver. They ate cookies and talked. Oliver told jokes. Albert told silly bug riddles. James told a scary ghost story. Just then, Oliver felt something move next to his foot. Was that a ghost? Was it a ghost? He jumped up. He turned on the flashlight. It's a snake, he cried. A big one. Albert and James jumped up too. The snake was big, all right, but it wasn't moving. Oh, said Oliver, it's just Father's old hose. They got back in their sleeping bags. What shall we do now? Asked James. Oliver couldn't think of anything. His eyes kept closing. Just then, something pinched him. Stop that, he said. Stop what? Said James. Stop pinching me. Stop pinching me, said Oliver. And tickling me, said Albert. I'm not pinching or tickling, said James. Oliver and Albert and James jumped up. My bugs, cried Albert. They escaped. The bugs were everywhere. They tried to catch them. I got one, said James. He tripped over Albert. Albert knocked over Oliver. Suddenly, there were a big crash. Uh-oh, said Oliver. They crawled out the fort. Our tower fell down, said Albert. And the teepee fell over, said James. My fort is wrecked, said Oliver. He knocked on the back door. What's wrong? Said Father. Can we sleep inside? Asked Oliver. Of course, said Father. So Oliver and Albert and James had a camp in on the porch. Tomorrow we'll rebuild your fort, said Albert. Maybe, said Oliver. We could even make into a castle. So that is all it for the book. Make sure to like and subscribe this video if you like.